The morning of my daughter's wedding began with a strange kind of quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a Sunday morning, but the kind that sits heavy in your chest, like your heart already knows something you don't. I stood in front of the mirror in my small bedroom, holding a suit I hadn't worn in nearly 10 years, dark gray, carefully pressed. I bought it long ago for a special occasion. Back then, I told the salesman, "One day I'll wear this when my little girl gets married." That little girl's name is Emily. For 32 years, she had been the brightest part of my life. I slowly slid my arms into the jacket, adjusting the shoulders. The fabric still smelled faintly of cedar from the closet. My hands trembled a little as I fastened the buttons. Age does that to you. Or maybe it was something else. On the dresser sat a small velvet box. Inside was a silver bracelet, simple, elegant, the kind Emily always liked when she was younger. I had bought it a month earlier. "From Dad," the little card read. I picked it up and slipped it carefully into my coat pocket. Then I looked at the photo frame beside my bed. Emily at 8 years old, missing her 2 front teeth, sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. Back then, she believed I could fix anything. Bikes, broken toys, bad dreams. Life has a way of slowly changing what people believe. I cleared my throat, grabbed my car keys, and headed out. The drive to the venue took about 40 minutes. It was held at a beautiful country estate outside town, a big white building surrounded by tall oak trees and green lawns that rolled gently toward a small lake. I had been there before. In fact, I was the one who had booked it. A few months earlier, Emily sat across from me at my kitchen table with brochures and excitement in her eyes. "Dad, I found the perfect place," she said. She talked about flowers and music and seating charts. I didn't understand half of it, but I listened the way fathers do, carefully, proudly, quietly. When she hesitated over the price, I placed my hand on hers. "Don't worry about that," I told her. She looked surprised. "Dad, it's expensive." I smiled. "You only get married once. Let your old man take care of it." Her eyes watered a little that day. Or at least, I thought they did. Now, as I pulled into the gravel parking lot, I remembered that moment and felt something warm inside my chest. I parked the car and sat there for a minute. The place looked beautiful. White chairs were arranged in neat rows under a flower arch. Workers carried trays and decorations across the lawn. Soft music drifted through the open doors of the reception hall. Guests were arriving, dressed in bright colors and laughter. I took a slow breath. Today, my daughter would start a new life, and I would be the man walking her down the aisle. That thought alone was enough to make my eyes sting. I stepped out of the car and straightened my jacket. For a moment, I just stood there, watching the scene. It's strange how memories begin to rise when you reach moments like this. Emily at 5 years old, running into my arms after her first day of school. Emily at 12, crying because a boy teased her braces. Emily at 17, asking me if I thought she was pretty enough. Every father knows those moments. They stay with you. They become part of the quiet map of your heart. I started walking toward the entrance. That's when I saw her. Emily stood near the doorway of the reception hall, surrounded by bridesmaids in pale blue dresses. Her wedding gown flowed around her like soft clouds. For a moment, I couldn't move. She looked exactly the way I always imagined. Beautiful, grown, happy. My chest swelled with pride. I began walking toward her, smiling. "Emily," I called gently. She turned. For a split second, our eyes met. Something flickered across her face. Surprise. Then something else. Something I didn't understand. She quickly stepped away from the bridesmaids and walked toward me. Her heels clicked softly against the stone walkway. When she reached me, she stopped about 3 feet away, not close enough for a hug. That was the first small thing that felt strange. "Dad," she said quietly. I smiled wider. "Sweetheart, you look beautiful." I reached into my pocket slightly, about to take out the bracelet, but she didn't smile back. Instead, her eyes moved nervously toward the entrance behind her, then back to me. "Dad, I'm really sorry," she said. The words landed oddly. "Sorry? For what?" I asked gently. She swallowed. Dad, you weren't invited. For a moment, the world didn't move. The music continued. People laughed somewhere behind us. But inside my chest, everything went silent. I blinked. What? She shifted her weight uncomfortably. This is just complicated, she said quickly. Jason's family is very particular about the guest list, and there were expectations. Jason was her fiancé. I had met him only a few times. Polite man. Quiet. His parents, however, had opinions about nearly everything. Still, I didn't understand. I'm your father, I said softly. Her eyes dropped to the ground. I know, and I love you, but today is stressful, and there are a lot of people here, and it would be better if you just... She hesitated. Then she said the words that would echo in my head for a very long time. Dad, please go home. The bracelet box inside my pocket suddenly felt very heavy. For a few seconds, I simply looked at her. Not angry, not shouting, just trying to understand. 32 years of bedtime stories, school lunches, hospital visits, birthday cakes, all of it stood quietly between us in that moment. Emily, I said slowly, did I do something wrong? Her lips pressed together. No, it's just easier this way. Easier. That word hurt more than the others. Behind her, someone called her name. The wedding planner waved urgently. Emily glanced back, then at me again. I'm sorry, Dad. And then she added softly, please don't make this harder. I nodded slowly. My hands felt strangely calm. The kind of calm that comes when your heart breaks quietly instead of loudly. I understand, I said. She looked relieved. That hurt a little too. I reached into my pocket. Not for the bracelet, just for my car keys. Well, I said gently, you look beautiful today. Her eyes flickered with something again. Guilt, maybe. Or maybe I only imagined it. I turned and began walking back across the gravel parking lot, step by step. No one stopped me. No one noticed. And I left the wedding the same way I had lived most of my life. Quietly. What Emily didn't know, what no one there knew, was that 2 hours later something very small would happen. A few quiet phone calls, a few simple cancellations, and suddenly, without me, there wouldn't be a wedding at all. The gravel beneath my shoes made a soft crunch as I walked back across the parking lot. No one stopped me. No one asked who I was. In a strange way, that might have been the hardest part. A man can prepare himself for anger. He can even prepare for disappointment. But being quietly invisible, that takes something different out of a person. I reached my old blue sedan and paused beside the door. For a moment, I looked back at the estate. From this distance, the place looked like something out of a magazine. White chairs under the arch, ribbons tied neatly along the aisle, guests laughing in small circles. Somewhere inside that building, my daughter was preparing to walk down the aisle, and somehow, I was not part of that moment. I opened the car door and sat inside. The seat creaked the same way it always had. My hands rested on the steering wheel, but I didn't start the engine right away. Instead, I looked at the bracelet box still sitting in my palm. A small silver bracelet. I remembered the day I bought it. The jeweler had asked, "Anniversary gift?" I smiled and said, "No, my daughter's wedding." He had congratulated me, said daughters always keep their fathers close to their hearts. Funny how strangers can say things like that with such confidence. I slipped the bracelet back into my coat pocket. Then I started the engine. The road away from the estate curved gently through the countryside. Tall trees lined both sides, their leaves moving slowly in the late afternoon wind. Normally, it was a peaceful drive. Today, the quiet inside the car felt heavier than usual. I drove slowly. There was no hurry now. As the road stretched ahead, memories began to appear the way they often do when you're alone with your thoughts. Emily at 6 years old, holding my finger as we crossed the street to her first piano lesson. Emily at 10, sitting on the kitchen counter while I tried to braid her hair before school. I was terrible at braiding. She used to laugh at the uneven loops and tell me it didn't matter. "Dad, you're trying," she would say. Trying always seemed to be enough back then. After her mother passed away, Emily and I learned how to take care of each other. She was only 12, too young to understand grief, but old enough to feel its weight. I remember the night after the funeral. She sat quietly on the living room floor, surrounded by the sympathy flowers people had sent. "Dad," she asked, "are we going to be okay?" I knelt beside her. I didn't know the answer, but I told her anyway. "Yes, we will." And for 20 years, I did everything I could to make that promise true. Extra shifts at work, packed lunches, late-night homework help, driving across town for dance recitals and school events. Every choice I made had one purpose. Emily. The car passed a small gas station just outside town. I almost pulled in out of habit, but the tank was still half full, so I kept driving. My hand stayed steady on the wheel. Surprisingly steady. I had expected anger to arrive by now, but it hadn't. Instead, there was something quieter. A slow realization, like a fog gradually lifting from a landscape you've known all your life. When Emily first started dating Jason, I tried to give them space. Young couples need that. Still, I noticed small changes. Phone calls that became shorter, visits that became rarer, the way she sometimes looked distracted when we spoke. Then there were the conversations about the wedding. At first, she had been excited. She would call me late in the evening with questions about table arrangements and flower colors. But over time, the calls changed. They became more about costs, more about expectations. Jason's parents, apparently, had very particular ideas about what a wedding should look like. Certain caterers, certain photographers, certain guest lists. At one point, Emily said something that stayed with me. "They're very traditional, Dad. Image matters to them." I remember laughing softly. "Sweetheart, weddings aren't about image. They're about people." She didn't respond right away. Then she changed the subject. At the time, I didn't think much about it. Now, driving down the quiet road, that moment felt different, like a small puzzle piece finally sliding into place. The town appeared ahead, familiar and calm. The same grocery store on the corner, the same coffee shop where Emily and I used to stop on Saturday mornings. Life continued exactly as it always had. Funny how the world does that. It keeps moving, even when something inside you has quietly cracked. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. The house stood just as I left it that morning. A small brick home with a narrow porch and 2 rocking chairs. Emily had painted the front door yellow when she was in college. "Sunshine color," she called it. I never changed it, even after she moved out. I stepped inside and hung my jacket on the coat rack. The house felt still, peaceful. In the kitchen, a small wedding invitation sat on the table. Emily had given it to me months ago, cream-colored paper with elegant gold lettering. "Emily Carter and Jason Whitmore request the honor of your presence." I picked it up and read the words again. For the first time, I noticed something odd. My name wasn't printed anywhere on the invitation, not as host, not even in the small family acknowledgments at the bottom. Back then, I assumed it was just modern formatting. Now, I wasn't so sure. I sat down at the kitchen table. The sunlight from the window stretched across the floor in long golden lines. For several minutes, I simply sat there, thinking, listening to the quiet. Then my phone buzzed gently on the table, a message from the event coordinator. "Mr. Carter, just confirming final payment authorization for today's services." I stared at the message. Months earlier, when Emily asked if I could help with the wedding expenses, I didn't hesitate. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the music, all arranged under my name, all tied to the same payment account. I never mentioned it publicly. I didn't need recognition. I just wanted my daughter to have a beautiful day. I looked at the message again, then I leaned back slowly in my chair. Something inside me had changed during that drive home. Not anger, not revenge. Something quieter, something clearer. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to ask a simple question. If I was not welcome at my own daughter's wedding, then why was I still carrying the responsibility for it? I picked up the phone, and for a long moment, I simply held it in my hand. The phone felt heavier than it should have. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the message from the event coordinator. The sunlight had shifted across the floor, climbing slowly toward the legs of the chair beside me. 2 hours earlier, I had been standing at my daughter's wedding. 2 hours earlier, I had believed I would walk her down the aisle. Life has a strange way of changing direction in very small moments. Sometimes it's just a sentence. Dad, you weren't invited. I exhaled slowly and placed the phone back on the table. For now, I didn't reply. Instead, I stood up and walked to the window above the sink. Outside, the neighborhood looked exactly as it always did. Mrs. Porter from across the street was watering her roses. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A delivery truck rolled slowly past. Ordinary life. The kind of life that continues whether your heart is full or broken. I poured myself a glass of water and sat back down. My mind wasn't racing the way I expected. It was quiet. Not empty. Just quiet, like the still surface of a lake after a storm has passed. I thought about Emily, not the woman in the wedding dress standing 3 feet away from me that afternoon, but the girl she used to be. Emily, at 7 years old, running into the house with scraped knees after falling off her bicycle. She had tried to hide the tears, but they spilled out anyway. "Dad," she sniffled, "I think the bike hates me." I remember kneeling beside her and wiping dirt from her cheek. "The bike doesn't hate you," I said. "You just need to learn how to ride it." And we spent the rest of that evening in the driveway. Again and again she tried. Again and again she fell. But eventually, she found her balance. The first time she rode without wobbling, she shouted so loudly the neighbors came outside to watch. That was Emily. Brave, determined, kind. So where had that girl gone? The question lingered in the quiet kitchen, and slowly, another thought followed it. Maybe she hadn't disappeared at all. Maybe she had simply been standing in the shadow of other people's expectations. Jason, his parents, their ideas about appearances and status. I had seen hints of it during the wedding planning, the careful way Emily spoke when mentioning them, the way she sometimes looked worried instead of excited. Still, none of that explained the moment outside the reception hall. None of it explained why she couldn't even hug me. My phone buzzed again. Another message. "Mr. Carter, we need confirmation within the hour to process final payments for the vendors." I leaned back in the chair. The room felt strangely calm. For the first time that day, I realized something important. This wasn't about money. It had never been about money. For 32 years, I had given my daughter everything I could. Time, energy, love, support. None of those things came with invoices. None of them required recognition. But respect was different. Respect is the quiet acknowledgement that someone belongs in your life, that they matter. And today, standing 3 feet away from me, Emily had made something painfully clear. I did not belong there. I was not welcome. I looked at the phone again. My fingers hovered over the screen. Then I typed a simple message. "Please cancel all payments under my authorization." I paused. Not out of doubt, but out of reflection. For years, I had believed love meant giving endlessly, doing whatever was necessary to keep the people you cared about happy. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten something important. Love without boundaries eventually becomes silence, and silence teaches people that your presence is optional. I pressed send. The message disappeared into the quiet air between me and the world outside. Then I placed the phone on the table and stood up. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. 3:12 p.m. By now the ceremony was probably beginning. Guests taking their seats, music starting softly, Emily standing at the end of the aisle. For a moment I imagined what the scene might look like when the coordinator realized the payments had been canceled. The venue contract under my name, the catering deposit tied to my account, the musicians booked through my authorization. Small details, quietly connected, like threads in a fabric no one had bothered to examine. But even now I felt no satisfaction in the thought, only a strange sense of clarity. Actions have consequences, not because someone seeks revenge, but because reality eventually catches up with decisions. I stepped onto the front porch and sat down in one of the rocking chairs. The afternoon air was warm and gentle. Somewhere nearby, a lawnmower hummed softly. I closed my eyes, not to escape the moment, but to sit with it, to understand it. Years ago, after Emily's mother passed away, I promised myself one thing. I would raise our daughter with kindness, with patience, with honesty, and I would never let bitterness shape the man she saw in me. That promise still mattered, even now, especially now. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was the event coordinator. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but then I answered. "Hello?" Her voice sounded breathless. "Mr. Carter, I'm sorry to bother you, but we've encountered a serious issue with the payment authorizations. The system shows everything has been canceled. The venue manager is asking for immediate clarification." I rocked gently in the chair. "I see," I said calmly. "Was this a mistake?" she asked quickly. I watched the sunlight move slowly across the porch railing. "No," I replied. There was a long pause on the other end. Then she spoke again, more carefully this time. "Sir, the ceremony is about to begin." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "I understand." Another pause. "Without the confirmed payments," she said quietly, "the vendors are refusing to proceed." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she asked the question she had probably been holding back. "Mr. Carter, would you like us to reinstate the payments?" I thought about Emily standing outside the reception hall, 3 feet away, asking me to go home. "Dad, please don't make this harder." I looked out across the quiet street. "No," I said gently, and after I ended the call, I sat there in silence. Not angry, not bitter, just still. Because sometimes the most powerful response a person can give is simply stepping away and allowing the truth to arrive on its own. The afternoon slowly turned into evening. I was still sitting on the porch when the sky began to soften into the pale colors of sunset. The rocking chair creaked gently beneath me, moving back and forth in a rhythm that had comforted me for years. Across the street, Mrs. Porter had finished watering her roses. The neighborhood grew quieter as people settled into their homes for dinner. Life continued. It always does. My phone rested on the small table beside me, silent for almost an hour after the call with the event coordinator. Then, eventually, it began to ring. The first call came from a number I didn't recognize. I watched the screen light up, buzz once, then fade to black. A minute later, it rang again. This time, it was Emily. Her name appeared on the screen just the way it always had. Emily. For 32 years, that name had been the center of my world. I didn't answer, not because I wanted to punish her, but because, for the first time in a long time, I understood something very clearly. Some conversations cannot happen in the middle of chaos. Some truths need quiet to be heard. The phone stopped ringing. A few minutes later, a message arrived. "Dad, what happened?" "The venue says the payments were canceled. Please call me." I looked at the words carefully. Not angry words, not even blaming words, just confused ones. That made sense. When you live a long time giving without limits, people begin to believe that giving will never stop, even when they ask you to leave. The phone buzzed again. Another message. "Dad, the ceremony can't start. Jason's parents are furious. Everyone is waiting. Please fix this." I leaned back in the chair and watched the evening light fade behind the houses. For a moment, I imagined the scene at the estate. Guests whispering in their seats, staff members speaking in low voices, Jason's parents trying to understand why the vendors were refusing to continue, and Emily, standing somewhere in that beautiful white dress, caught in the middle of something she hadn't fully understood. The consequences of silence often arrive slowly, but when they do, they arrive clearly. I stood up from the rocking chair and walked inside. The house felt peaceful. The same kitchen table, the same yellow front door. Nothing had changed here, except me. I poured a cup of tea and sat down. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Emily. This one was shorter. "Dad, please." I held the phone in my hands for a long moment. Then I typed a reply. Emily, I'm at home. A few seconds passed, then her response appeared. Can I come talk to you? I stared at the message. Part of me felt the old instinct rise immediately. The instinct to fix everything, to make the problem disappear, to smooth over the tension the way fathers often do. But another part of me, quieter, wiser, reminded me of the moment outside the reception hall, 3 feet of distance, no hug. Please go home. I took a slow breath. Then I replied, Yes. It was nearly dark when headlights appeared in my driveway. I stood near the kitchen window and watched the car pull in. Emily stepped out. Even from a distance, I could see the wedding dress moving around her ankles as she walked toward the house. The sight stirred something deep inside my chest. For a brief moment, I saw her as the little girl again, running up the front steps after school, eager to tell me about her day. But this was different. Tonight, she walked slowly, carefully, like someone carrying a heavy realization. I opened the door before she knocked. She stood there under the porch light, her makeup slightly smudged, the veil hanging loosely behind her shoulders.